Water Foundation, and this is a presentation and lab for the Northern Saskatchewan Student Eco Conference at Churchill Community High School in La Ronge, Saskatchewan. And today is Saturday, October 27th. Only a few days until Halloween. Get your costumes ready. So our mission is to educate the leaders of today and tomorrow about drinking water quality issues to realize our goal of safe drinking water being available to every Canadian. So usually when people think about drinking water issues, they think about countries like in Africa, but we actually have quite a bit of problems right here in Canada in terms of rural and First Nations communities mainly. So we became a registered Canadian charity in 1998, so this year is our 20th year, and we started sending educational kits to schools in 2001. So the founders of SCWF were 5 international scientists, and they wanted to help developing countries with their water issues, but, sorry.
It's good.
First time wearing one of these things.
Yeah. Is it on? Because I'm not sure if I'm getting the good.
Testing.
Oh, is the battery dead?
Yeah, I left an extra.
I'll just go check if I can find another battery. Is it double A? Yeah. I'll be right back real quick.
Oh, it goes around your...
Couldn't find it. Maybe it'll be okay without it. I was just told that with this it might not pick up the sound as well.
Well, I can project.
Okay.
Hi, you might as well come and sit at the table because that's where we're going to be doing the testing. That's all right with you.
Is it here?
Okay, so the founders of Safe Drinking Water Foundation are 5 international scientists, and they wanted to help developing countries, so they were thinking about the countries that you think of when you usually think about drinking water issues, so like in Africa, with their water issues. But then they realized that many communities in Canada are also facing big challenges in terms of their drinking water quality. So what are some water quality issues in Canada? So a lot of rural and First Nations communities in Canada deal with drinking water quality issues because they don't have as many resources often as the bigger centers. So often their raw water is poor quality. Often they don't have as many trained staff members, as much funding for it, things like that. And on any given day, there are about 1,000 drinking water advisors in Canada, which is quite shocking to people because, like I say, when you think about drinking water quality issues, you don't first think about a developed country like Canada. So imagine having to boil water for everything you do at home, cooking, cleaning, washing. Sometimes communities are under boil water advisories for decades. So I know that last holiday season, we had a water pipe break on our street and we had no water for a couple days and then went to boil water for a few days, and that was a pain, and that was less than a week. Imagine decades. Have you lived in a community that had a boil water advisory for a while? Yeah? How long, do you know?
1 week.
1 week, yeah, so you had to deal with it for a week. Some people have had to deal with it for 23 years. So this is an example of the difference between the raw water quality of Aboriginal communities or some Aboriginal communities and of urban communities. So on the left, you see an example of yellow quill raw water, and you can see that it's very black, very dark, and it only undergoes 5 minutes of treatment before people drink it. And on the right, you see a sample of Saskatoon raw water, South Saskatchewan River raw water. And it is quite clear already, but you should never drink raw water. But it will still undergo 2 hours of treatment before it's drunk, because Saskatoon has a large water treatment plant. They have a lot more resources than a small community or First Nations community. So some First Nations communities have very long-standing boil water advisories. So Shoal Lake 40, have you heard of Shoal Lake 40? Shoal Lake 40, it's in Ontario close to the Manitoba border. So what they did there was about 20 years ago, they created an aqueduct for their water to go to Winnipeg, and they cut off the community. Basically, they're on a man-made island, and it's very difficult for them to get anywhere, especially in winter, especially when the ice is not solid, and there is some ice, like it's not summer, they can't boat or whatever. And so people have died because they couldn't get to medical services. Glassy Narrows water has disinfectant byproducts which are not removed or reduced by boiling the water. So they have mercury in their water from a paper manufacturing process plant. So they have a do not consume order that's been in place for over 4 years. Neskantaga First Nation has been under a boil water advisory since February 1st, 1995. So that's for over 23 years. So their chief says, we're over 20 years already where our people haven't been able to get the water they need to drink from their taps or to bathe themselves without getting any rashes. So imagine you girls are all under 23 years of age, you would have never been able to get a glass of water from the tap and drink it. So this is Potlatech First Nation and Cape Breton's treated water. Can you see that it's very dark, very black? You probably do not want to drink it. It has high levels of iron and manganese that exceed aesthetic objectives for water quality. The Canadian guideline is 15 true color units. Yes?
Can it kill you?
Well, it's not going to kill you like right away. It could cause health problems that could then possibly lead to your death. But it's not like you just have one glass and you die. So this woman, she lives there, and she was first told that the water was safe to drink. Like, yes, it is dark, yes, it is black, but that's just, you know, how it looks. That's just an aesthetic thing. And then she found out that it's not safe to drink. So she's quite angry because she's wondering about those future health implications. So Lyndon First Nation, so you guys might have heard of Prime Minister Trudeau's promise that 5 years after he got elected, he would have all the long-term drinking water advisories in First Nations communities ended. So this is one where there has been some partial success, but it also shows how difficult it's going to be to eliminate all of the problems in First Nations communities in terms of drinking water. So Lyndon First Nations in BC, and it's a patchwork of 56 reserves spread over 14,161 acres. So animal feces and agricultural activity upstream release coliform bacteria such as E. coli into the water, making it potentially unsafe to drink. So for years, the residents bought bottled water or they just drank it untreated anyway. And elders in the community say that that's led to many children's deaths. It has been under boil water advisory for over 20 years. But they've now built a totally new facility that was designed to be smaller, low on maintenance, and fit inside a shipping container. All for the price of $500,000, so $500,000. Now, many in the community have clean drinking water from the tap. That's great, right? Well, their problems are still far from over. Indigenous Services Canada, so the promise they made about the First Nations communities under drinking water advisories having safe drinking water, notice the word communities, they say they're responsible for providing clean drinking water in Indigenous communities. And it considers groupings of 5 households or more as eligible for funding because one house is not a community. So when the reserves were created, the government assigned them a patchwork of 56 parcels of land, some more than 100 kilometers apart. Many of these reserves have fewer than 5 houses. So the water on these small reserves was still unsafe. A point of entry system was developed, and it treats water as it enters each home, and it costs $10,000 per unit. So far, 5 homes have had one installed. So no, the problem has not been solved. 13 houses across several reserves are still required to boil or haul water because their water sources are too unreliable to support point of entry systems. So according to a CBC investigation in 2015, 2/3 of all First Nation communities in Canada have been under at least one drinking water advisory at some time in the last decade. So this is an unacceptable situation. The United Nations recognizes access to clean water and sanitation as a human right, and Canada has further obligations under the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. First Nations people should have more decision-making power. So often what happens is that the federal government sends in their representatives, maybe an engineer, things like that, and then they get bids from engineering companies about the water treatment system, and they often just pick whatever's cheapest. So that's not looking at if it's going to treat that raw water with those problems. It's not looking at what level it's going to treat it to, whether it's going to meet every single Canadian guideline. And it's not looking at the maintenance and the parts that will need to be replaced, because that's the responsibility of the First Nations community. So we're going to learn about IBM systems soon, and those systems require very little maintenance and very little part replacements and things like that, so it's cheaper for the First Nations communities in the long run. And there's a lot of First Nations communities that don't have piping systems to every home, but when they can save that money on the maintenance and the parts of the water treatment system, they can then build that infrastructure because they have the funds for that then. Are there any questions at this point? Okay. So as of October 19, 2018, there were 67 long-term drinking water advisories. So that means there's still 67 to be solved. As of October 21st, 2018, there were 33 short-term drinking water advisories in First Nations communities south of 60 degrees, excluding British Columbia and within the Saskatoon Tribal Council. As of October 22nd, 2018, there were 53 do not consume orders and 1,261 boil water advisories in place across Canada. In Saskatchewan, there were 4 do not consume orders and 327 boil water advisories. So like I said, at any given time, there's about 1,000 drinking water advisories in place across Canada. Right now, there's over 1,300. When I looked at the Saskatchewan map on the website watertoday.ca on October 22nd, 2018, I saw that there were currently boil water advisories in Clearwater River First Nation, Black Lake First Nation, Sandy Bay, Medstead, and Garrett, to name but a few. And these are in northern Saskatchewan, so you might have heard of them. One of the girls from the previous session, she said that the Clearwater River First Nation one has since been lifted. It was lifted at some point last week, but I got that information about, I think it was 6 days ago. So what is the quality of my community's water? So you can visit this website to find the test results of your specific community's drinking water. And in smaller communities, tests are performed for only a few contaminants though, and they're not performed very often. So for example, in Orange, their water is tested for 6 different things. The bare minimum is 5 things, so you have to test for coliforms, free chlorine, total chlorine, and E. coli trihalmethanes, and they also test for turbidity. So this doesn't tell you if there's an excess of another contaminant like arsenic in your water. And arsenic tests are not that expensive or that difficult to perform. One of the tests in the high school Operation Water Drop Kit is the arsenic test. So there are regulations and laws, right? So in Canada, they're not called regulations or laws, and they aren't legally enforceable. So what would happen if on the highway, they didn't have a speed limit? They just said, we recommend that you go less than 100 kilometers per hour. Probably a lot of people would speed. So for example, the water does not always meet the guidelines. So Orange water did not meet the guideline for total coliforms, on January 18, 2011. However, the water does now meet the guideline for trihalomethanes, but it didn't in November 2017. Stanley Mission, there they did not meet the guideline for trihalomethanes on August 28, 2012. And trihalomethanes are a byproduct of chlorination. So when the chlorine reacts with other things in the treatment process, it produces trihalomethanes, chlorine byproducts, and those trihalomethanes are carcinogenic, meaning cancer-causing. The water in Morse, Saskatchewan, where I lived for half a year when I was teaching there, it's much too high in manganese, over 10 times the guideline. When I was teaching there, I didn't know anything about water, really. I just knew that the water was yellowish-brown, and when I put it through the Brita, it was still quite yellowish-brown, so I'd pour it out and put it through the Brita again, be slightly yellowish-brown. It was not very good water at all. So there are spreadsheets of water quality test results on Safe Drinking Water Team's homepage, safedrinkingwaterteam.org. So Saskatchewan data. So we studied 6 characteristics of particular interest. We studied trihalomethanes, arsenic, free chlorine, total chlorine, iron, and manganese. There were 745 waterworks for which there was data for at least one of our characteristics of interest. And remember a few slides back where we talked about how many were under boil water and drinking water advisories. So in Saskatchewan there's 4 do not consumers and 327 boil water advisories, so that's 331 out of 745, so that's almost half. We found that 71 of these waterworks had data that was over the guideline for trihalomethanes, so 100 micrograms per liter. 24 had data that was over the guideline for arsenic, so 10 micrograms per liter. 68 had data that showed they do not have the minimum allowable amount of free chlorine, which is 0.1 milligrams per liter. 68 were over the guideline for iron. 194 were over the guideline for manganese. So what are the worst case scenarios in Saskatchewan? Well, one waterworks has data showing 420 micrograms per liter of trihalomethanes. That's over 4 times the Canadian guideline. And remember that trihalomethanes are carcinogenic, meaning cancer-causing. So one waterworks has data showing 44.6 micrograms per liter, which is over 4 times the Canadian guideline. And arsenic is basically poisonous. It can cause dark spots on your hands and feet and other health problems. So one waterworks has data showing 0 milligrams per liter of free chlorine. Well, why is that a problem? Once the chlorine has reacted with what's in the water at the water treatment plant, it's then the water sent in the pipes to your home. So you need to have some free or residual chlorine that hasn't reacted with anything yet, so that if the pipes have bacteria or parasites or viruses in them, then it can kill those things. So one waterworks has data showing 5.9 milligrams per liter of iron, which is over 19 times the Canadian guideline. And one waterworks has data showing 8.44 milligrams per liter of manganese, which is over 168 times the aesthetic objective, and 16 times the amount at which it becomes a health concern as it can affect brain health. So there's an aesthetic guideline for manganese, and that's usually the guideline that they talk about, but then about 10 times that amount becomes a health objective because it can affect brain health if it's that high. Biological water treatment is a more effective and more environmentally friendly method of treating drinking water. So the IBRAM, the Integrated Biological Reverse Osmosis Membrane Treatment System, has been implemented in 17 communities, and it's being mainly used on First Nations groundwater sources in Saskatchewan. So there is one surface water IBRAM treatment plant in Satellite, Alberta, so that's a few hours north of Edmonton. It's in northern Alberta. And the IBRAM system harnesses the power of bacteria and uses very little chemicals in order to consistently produce safe drinking water. So if you were to take that water from Yellow Quill, that black water, and put it through a reverse osmosis system, like direct reverse osmosis, it would immediately, probably within a day or so, basically gunk up those membranes, those RO membranes, and there would be a lot of backwashing required, and there would also be a lot of membrane replacement and cleaning required, which is hard work and also expensive, both in terms of manpower and in terms of replacing the membranes. So these are the IBMs in the world. So they're all in First Nations communities, except now they're starting to put them in rural communities. So they're currently under construction. There's an expansion happening at Whitecap Dakota Dunes Casino that's near Saskatoon. Savvy Lake, Alberta is currently under construction, so Alberta's going to have a second one. And then Kiniston First Nation is under construction, and then the two first rural ones, Village of Mankota and Town of Craig. So when we started our organization, we were very focused on water quality and not on water conservation, because we said, you know, if you don't have safe drinking water, it doesn't matter if you have a ton of water, you're still going to die if you don't have safe drinking water. So since then, we've decided that it's also important for water conservation. There's a lot of areas that are under water scarcity. For example, lately it was Cape Town, South Africa, that almost reached day zero of not having water. So these are some quotes about water conservation being important. And we also got a student action competition. So this year we're running a Saskatchewan student action on Saskatchewan water attitudes competition, where students will learn what the source of their water is. It's surprising how many people don't even know where their water comes from, and it's very hard or maybe impossible to care about conserving water and to care about water quality and things like that if you don't know where your water comes from. So what might affect their water source, and teach others about that, and conserve water, so maybe take shorter showers, shut the tap off when they're brushing their teeth, things like that, and encourage others to do that. And one group of students from kindergarten to grade 8 will win a prize package, and one in grade 9 to 12. The prize package are valued at $3,000, and they include a water bottle filling station, a commemorative plaque, and then depending on how much money is left over, reusable water bottles and our water treatment, our water testing kits. So by 2020, about 30 to 40% of the world will have water scarcity. By 2025, an estimated 1 billion people will live in areas plagued by water scarcity, with 2/3 of the world's population living in water-stressed regions. UN studies project that 30 nations will be water scarce in 2025, up from 20 in 1990, so 1.5 times as many. So this is about the competition. So for more information, people can visit that website. So we have 7 different educational programs and 4 different educational kits. Our kits have been sent to over 2,700 different schools across Canada. They've also been used in various universities in Canada and in the States. And there's always a lot of teachers who request sponsored kits. So we have elementary Operation Water Drop kits and high school Operation Water Drop kits. And the high school Operation Water Drop kits are the ones that we're going to be using today. Operation Water Pollution kits are reusable for at least 2 years. They're a digital TDS and a digital pH meter. Operation Water Biology kits show students how biological water treatment works, and they test chlorine, chloramine, ammonia, and ARM. And Operation Water Spirit is the First Nations perspective on drinking water. We're currently redeveloping that program. It's how water is used in First Nations traditional ceremonies, and it's also about issues in First Nations communities in terms of drinking water. For example, we'll have a case study on Neskantaga, we'll have a case study on Saddle Lake, we'll have a case study on Yellow Quill, we'll have a case study on Grassy Narrows and Shoal Lake 40. So the Operation Community Water Footprint is a free program on our website that teaches students that 1 liter of treated drinking water, so when you fill up your water bottle with 1 liter of treated drinking water, that's not the same as 1 liter of water from the source, from the river or from the lake or river. It's more than that, because have you heard of virtual water? So if you look online, virtual water is the amount of water that it takes to produce something. So for example, it might say it takes X liters of water to produce a loaf of bread, or it takes X liters of water to make a cup of coffee. So 1 liter of your treated drinking water going into your water bottle is not the same as 1 liter of water needed to produce that, because there's virtual water in the chemicals that are used to treat the water. There's also loss at the water treatment plant, like when they backwash and things like that. And then there's also loss in the pipes in the distribution system. If you watch Explained on Netflix, the one about water, they'll talk about some areas that are really lacking water and how much they're also losing in their distribution system. Operation Water Health is about health issues caused by unsafe drinking water, so diseases like Legionella, Cryptosporidium, different things that can happen to you if you drink unsafe water. And Operation Water Flow is very interdisciplinary. So for example, in social studies, students learn about who is responsible for their drinking water. And in math, students calculate how much water they use in a day. Depending on what source you look at, either Canadians or Americans use the most water per person per day. So today you will be using a high school Operation Water Drop kit. So we're going to test L'Orange water and compare it to some controls. And we're going to do a few tests. You girls can decide which tests we do. Are there any questions at this point? No? Okay, so thank you for becoming part of the solution to make safe drinking water a reality for everyone. I talked to a couple of you girls earlier. I know one of you wants to go into media studies and one wants to become RCP officers. So you will be leaders of the future. You'll be interacting with people. Maybe you'll make a documentary about water issues. So visit our website at safewater.org or contact us at info@safewater.org or our phone number for additional information about any of our educational programs. So now